Hi, everybody. Thank you. Okay. First slide. While we wait for the first slide, I too would like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging and the First Nations, any First Nations Australians here this evening. The work we've done over the years stretches across the traditional lands of many Aboriginal peoples, from the Arunda in Central Australia to the Wiyukulli in far west New South Wales, the Dunghutti on the mid-north coast, the Bunurong and Wurundjeri in Victoria, Palawa in Tasmania, Darug around Dirubban River, Gwiggle in Kamay, Wongal in Sydney's inner west, and here on the lands of the Gadigal people. Okay, let's try this. These shell-worked slippers are made by Bidjigal elder Esme Timbre, whom we had the great honour of meeting through our work at Kamay. I would like to thank Famin and his team and the team at the Art Gallery New South Wales. Many of the images I will show are personal photographs tonight, but I do want to acknowledge Brett Boardman and Arietta Atali, photographers, and as always, the contribution of a team in the few project images that you will see. Thank you. I think my team's here. I'm recently returned from a whirlwind architecture tour of central and northern India. One of the places we visited was the medieval city of Jodhpur, on first appearance as a chaotic city. As an architect, when travelling, you search for the logics to evolve comprehension of how it came to be, to begin to understand pieces of it. Jodhpur started around the mid-15th century with a fort on top of a rocky outcrop. A wall was built around its base, enclosing a defensible and safe place that would encourage people to settle. This is a gruelling desert climate, 50 degrees in summer. The stepwell gave public access to the once clean groundwater on three sides, lots of people at the same time. The narrow streets gave shade. The haveli or courtyard houses give air. The market chowk or square connects directly to the old city gate for trade. The blue signifies belonging to Brahmin, or let's call it brand Jodhpur, and it's indeed a great blue. It's quite confronting to ask an architect to talk about themselves rather than about architecture. I think of our lives a little like the city of Jodhpur, something we understand as a collection of connected fragments. Time might be linear, but our lives are not. We could string any number of narratives around any number of fragments, each would be real. This is a very long introduction to my very little talk, which I have titled, Husbands. It is common for partners in life to also be partners in practice. The Griffins, the Eameses, the Seidlers, Lacton Vassal, Floris Pratts, Welsham Major, Sylvester Fuller, Chenchow Little, Collins and Turner, Bourne and Blue. Not that many have done so twice, like I have, and whether or not that verges on serial. I can think only of Enrique Marias with Carme Pinos and Benedetta Tagliabue. Let's call it the elephant in the room, or here in Jaipur, the elephants on the columns. So Husbands is a lens for the fragments that I bring together in this talk. Why? Because we are shaped by those we are close to and spend time with. We would not be who we are had they not been so significant in our lives. Husbands are the namesake of my practice. Neeson, Murcutt, Neil. I begin with Neeson, my mother's husband, Ian, then moved to my late husband, Nick, and to my now husband, Stephen. Ian Neeson. Now, there is something that these three men have in common, and that is their sense of play. Stephen needs little encouragement to play. He's actually in Bali with his brother, right now surfing. For Nick, play was his default setting. And with siblings 6 and 7 years my junior, my father was my playmate as a young child. And indeed, a key figure for play in the young lives of my children also. Being playful is not so much an attitude as a state of being that is underpinned by curiosity, which is a quality I value most. Carme Pinos, Enrique's Enrique Moraes' first wife, talks about the process of architecture akin to playing a game. That the work is really in establishing the rules of the game. Once you've done that, you just simply let the design play itself out to those rules. This was in essence what Architectura Critica taught, the post-grad masters I undertook in Barcelona. Some architects talk about knowing the right question to ask. I think of it more like establishing the layered logics of a project, but always towards a higher purpose of delight, magic, or playfulness. Nick Merkert used to say, "For a child, play is work." Ever a child in some ways. Here I am peeling an onion with my dad in our first combi. Like many families, life revolved around mealtime, even when you're on the move. You may notice the cassette player behind me and the red case in the back. It was full of tapes. Ian played classical guitar and we all played the tapes. There is no acoustic privacy in a combi. My childhood was an oral place of sound and quiet. Hush while the baby slept, hush while my mother slept. She was a nurse who spent decades working night duty. I carry an interest in the acoustic of space, how it holds sound, amplifies or repels it, how it brings us together, its acoustic signature. Ian and my mother Carla left Australia as young adults and landed in Europe. The idea was simply an adventure. We left when I was 4.5 and returned when I was 9, with a baby brother and toddler sister. I had a diverse experience of home, 2 combis in all, and a sort of share house commune that acted as a base between trips, where I was the only child in a household of 16 adults, that is, until my sister was born. Children have a strong spatial sensibility. Our earliest memories are often spatial ones. The magical water world of Venice. Even in the 1970s, there was a fear it was sinking. We returned to Australia to live in a pair of inner west terraces that were shared with my grandparents. There were no backyard fences, 3 bedrooms in one half, 2 bedrooms, a lounge and a telephone in the other, each with a kitchen, dining, bathroom and an extra loo. In fact, it was not until I was 19 that we had the experience of the era norm, a nuclear family living in a suburban bungalow on a quarter-acre block. This experience of communal and intergenerational family, of changing places, shifting home, shifting school, shifting language, is not radical, but it was atypical. It has perhaps made me resistant to a fixed architecture. I am drawn more to evolving an architecture out of the specifics of a particular project and a diversity of project types and clients. Stephen refers to it as specific difference. Nick at Bondi, where we lived for well over a decade. We met at the University of Sydney. He was in 5th year, I was in 2nd. He had a brief post-school interlude with the restaurant scene before coming to architecture. Like so many architects, he loved everything about food. Something we shared, we cooked together and big meals for many friends. Nick spent time living and working in Hobart, and then in Italy after he graduated. He was an avid bushwalker and a great traveller. He set up his own practice back in Sydney, sharing a studio in Kent Street with Camilla Block, Neil Durback, Sue Barnsley and Joe Gretsch. Here we are with some of the studio in Venice. Nick had learnt Italian at university and lived there for a year, in fact. Of course, he loved being our local. Nick was insightful. He connected deeply to others, and in the words of 4-year-old Alice, our equally insightful daughter, he was a little bit naughty. Let's call it playful. Nick and I fell in love here at the farm, a year after I graduated. We joined our separate practices 9 years later, through circumstance rather than intention. Nick had been minding my projects whilst I was studying in Barcelona. The farm was special to Nick, is special to Glenn, and is special to me. The screened veranda is my favourite room anywhere, for all the life lived here within it. Nick loved to be in water. It was his good place. This is why we lived in Bondi. It is a trait he has passed to our children. He grew up sailing lasers off Mossman. He had a passion for it, the harbour environment, the operation of the boat in unison with the waves and wind. And he had an uncanny ability to infect others with his enthusiasm, here convincing a consortium of mates to buy a share in a Hartley, a wooden trailer sailor, called Trump, actually, well before the era of Trump. Elemental. Sailing, swimming, snorkelling, fishing, bushwalking, eating, travelling, camping. This was playtime. And Nick looked to bring that to his work and our work. Here we are in Nick's box house, which he referred to as a hard tent. We've just finished eating mussels that he collected from the Bega River, cooked in a giant pot over the outdoor fire. His clients had been camping on the site for some time and had established a fire pit and an outdoor bath. The hard tent was an addition to this campsite, in a sense respecting the activity already taking place on the site. And I think, in fact, if he was around to witness the connecting with country, he would have been so very good at it. The Larapinta Campsite's World Expeditions is very directly elemental, an ephemeral communal structure that supports camping. Like the box house, this house almost sets up camp on its site. Its internal footprint is very small. Canvas, the fabric of camping and boating, is elevated as a material of architecture. Together we sought to make architecture that would heighten, intensify and amplify. A room to the rock, a room to the water, a room to the bush. Swimming outdoors in a park, making the park feel bigger. Editing out the sound of traffic so that you can instead hear the gentle splash of swimmers. Change rooms that are dry and airy with a view to the sky. This is a photo of Stephen moving out of the studio he shared with Simon Pendle in Perth, Pendle and Neil. They were making beautiful projects together, but Stephen and I had fallen in love and he was relocating. On the wall is a photograph of the West Australian outback by Stephen's friend Gert Stockman. It hangs now in our house. Gertz has an art and architecture practice with fellow architect Gabriella Seifert in Frankfurt. This work, belonging to a series, all made in WA, connects landscape, language and time, keen interests of Stephen. He has always been drawn to art. I remember his paintings from university. We met, like Nick, at the University of Sydney. Stephen too had an art practice in Perth with his friend and acclaimed artist, Jurek Wybranak. They called themselves Surf. We visited Gert Stockman in his incredible home in Gelnhausen. He lives in his art, the outside of which is inscribed in lines of text, a poem he'd commissioned. Extraordinary, with a huge rock in the dining room and a bedroom that slides out roofless over the street. And whilst in Europe, Venice, another commonality. Stephen completed a PhD by project with Leon van Schaik at RMIT. He mapped the settlements along the Perth to Kalgoorlie water pipeline, turned these into spatial models and really experiential fragments, a little like the way I've structured this talk, that bind into being. Beauty and ephemera. His is an internal interest in beauty and the ephemera of the moment, something we seek together. Land's Edge, A Coastal Memoir, is an autobiographical description of the West Coast. a place I can now feel in my skin, the dryness, the brightness, the wind, Noongar country. Like Tim Winton, Stephen is from Perth. A flying family, his father and brother, both pilots. He came to Sydney to work for John Andrews, completed his degree here, and worked briefly for Jodhpur before returning to Perth with his young family, taking up an academic position at Curtin and establishing his small practice with Simon Pendle. From West Coast to East Coast. We were not working together at the time when I was designing the Kempsey Crescent Head Surf Life Saving Club, but talking about life and work. Just make it a beachy thing. Sage advice. Stephen has a strong attunement to place, especially coastal place. Stephen's playfulness extends beyond the beach, I'm happy to say. I called it his happy gene. From cubby house to our own house, a sketch of our own house in Bronte. The table is the centrepiece of the house. Located on a busy road, we carved out a courtyard to make a sanctuary, inviting in the landscape. We craned in a tree, repelling the sound of traffic. Stephen has the green thumb. We talk about our work together as providing settings for life. Here the setting is for our broad family life. Elemental, lowbrow materials, rich and changing moments, colour reflective in the black window portal. A white kitchen pocket elevated to view over the street. Here at night, a stage. Outdoor cinema, playing with artificial light, and with natural light, glimpses of shadow. Stephen sent this photo to me when I was in India. He called it home. A coloured aluminium artwork he made that hangs in our house, resonating with a refracted rainbow light coming through a window, a moment. And this is the view, sometimes, through a square skylight in our house. We call it our moon window. We savour these shared experiences in the everyday, at work and at play. Thank you.
You were in India, as you mentioned, and thank you that you were not feeling that with so much energy today when you came and participated. But what did you do in India that you...
We went to Chandigarh, which actually there should have been a note in the travel notes to bring binoculars, because it was a little bit frustrating. We couldn't actually get that close to some of the buildings. But Ahmedabad was just incredible for the I guess the modern projects that we saw there was great.
How many days was that?
10.
10? Very cool.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah, intense. Yeah.
With your whole career and all that you have experienced, also with the situation 15 years ago with Nick, I wonder how you feel now, if there is something that scares you or makes you worry, or you think, I'm stronger to whatever comes.
I guess I have never really sort of planned my career. As I intimated, Nick and I sort of just fell into working together. And actually, we really enjoyed it. It was quite fractious sort of relationship, working relationship. We'd say, no, that's a terrible idea. And the other would say, no, that's a terrible idea. And it wasn't until we both agreed that we knew maybe we'd settled on the right approach. So it was kind of quite exhausting way to work, but, it worked. And it was not my plan to then work on my own. And that really did take quite some adjustment after he died. I sort of tried to channel him, conversations, and I mean, Sue Barnsley, who's here, and Marion Goucher were close friends, and actually Camille Block, who really helped that, I guess, that conversation flow, plus the studio, of course. And I guess slowly, you really develop that capacity to work without that person who you've been so close to. And I think that builds then a strength that you carry on.
That strength that maybe was was unseen for a period of time. You had a kind of very different role in the partnership with him, and now you had to took another different role.
Yeah, I'm not so sure actually. I mean, one of the reasons we joined our practice was that I'd been doing little houses and Nick had been doing bigger houses, and we really wanted to work on public projects, and so we thought, okay, well, why don't we work together on try and get some public projects? So that really was sort of the drive. I'd say Nick connected so well with the residential clients. He was just so big and warm, and sometimes didn't have the patience for the processes that are involved around more institutional work. So we probably had a little bit of a split appearing there, but we didn't really split projects, and neither did Stephen and I.
And you mentioned before that you are shaped by people you are close to.
Yeah.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of people that you like to have around that you consider that they improve the way you practice as an architect?
Actually, we did. Yes, sometimes, like clients.
Some
clients, yeah. We were invited to put in an expression of interest for Barker College. This was a few years ago. And we weren't so sure. It was like basketball courts for a private school. We're like, is this really us? And we had hesitated. And then we saw the principal of the school being interviewed on the TV late one night.
Yes.
And we were captivated. And he was such an incredible humanist. And,
yes.
And I just turned to Stephen and I said to him, we need this person in our lives, like to spend, because you spend a lot of time with your clients, actually, and you learn a lot through them. So, that's a bit more of a professional answer, but, and we really, really went for that job then.
And it worked?
Yeah, and he's still a really great friend.
And how do you do when the client is not that visionary? I mean, that can happen too.
Yeah. Okay, how do you deal with that? Yep. You bite your tongue. You know when to bite your tongue. Well, I think you have to... it's interesting. Most residential clients that we have, have some vision about their lives, at least, Yeah, I guess you get some project managers who are just doing their job. And that is challenging. Everyone in the room who's an architect would have that experience. I think I remember actually not so long ago asking clients, so what's actually the vision for this project? Like, what's the kind of big picture? And they're like, oh, what do you mean? They really couldn't answer me. So, yeah, it happens, and sometimes you just have to try and lead, I suppose. It's your job sometimes to lead rather than to interpret, and other times when you have clients with really kind of strong ethics or vision, you're really trying to fall into their slipstream.
And I guess when you get to have to work with one project manager of the client, how do you try to kind of speak to the person who has the say in the conversation? It feels like sometimes project managers, as contact person from a project, kind of doesn't lead to something that will be better somehow. It's yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know when to agitate to speak to the right person. Often, actually, sometimes they're great. You do have experiences where they're really good.
That's true.
Yeah.
That you have been in a, when I think about you, I think of a very collaborative person, that you has not hesitated to contact people around you, have been in good touch with Camila and the office, but also with others. And it feels sometimes that we miss that opportunity to collaborate with other architects, that we work in bubbles or kind of separated. How do you make sure that, or how do you promote collaboration with other architects?
Yeah.
Is something natural that comes to you, or did you have to learn about that?
Look, I think you collaborate with other architects in your own studio. Like, you know.
That's for sure, yeah.
I think, I've always been inspired by Barack Obama. Remember, he won his election, and then he went looking for all the best people in all the various different, fields where he needed information. And I think, ideally within an office, you have a group of architects who become very good at what they do, and then so there's that collaboration that happens within the office. And I think when you're collaborating with other practices, I mean, you've got to be very clear about what the purpose and intent of the collaboration is. And sometimes it's based on friendship, sometimes it's based on location, and sometimes it's based on skill. And I think we've had some really successful collaborations and some less successful collaborations. But I think for our team, when our team feels part of like one bigger team, and it's not so much, there's no them and us, that's when you know it's really working well.
That's good. And do you have any advice to small practices with all the different times and situations that you have lived through your career? Is there any piece of advice that you will give small practices?
It's a really challenging time. When I graduated, so many people I knew were doing private jobs, and almost everybody knew somebody who had an aunt or an uncle or who needed a bathroom renovation or a kitchen renovation or like a new garage, something. Like that's how. And we got to design those and get experience in building the spaces that you've designed quite early. I think that's much harder now. It's not everybody knows someone with cash who can involve them in small projects because the cost of building is so expensive. And what should be fantastic fodder for young architects, which is apartment renovations, with all the legislation that's come in New South Wales, it's almost impossible unless you've done a whole lot of them before. So, but to get experience building things is, I found to be a really powerful part of my education. I think I learned a lot after university, actually. And I'd say Nick and Stephen have both been sort of tutors in the same way I probably have been for them too.
You can imagine that. And is there something that you wish you could have learned at university that you had to learn through the hard way, through experience?
I guess not every teacher that I had at university set a high goal, actually.
Said what, sorry?
Not everybody set a high goal. There was quite a lot of teaching to the sort of mediocre level, and it was almost when I sort of started spending more time with Nick that he was like, well, why can't you do it why couldn't you do it like that? That sort of search for the intensity even in small things, that actually was okay and was good. So I think that lesson probably.
This is a good one. We'll search for intensity. And then, Rachel, it has been a very nice talk and conversation. Later we'll have a round of discussion, but for now, thank you a lot for your time.